So, welcome back to Wood Coach Creative. This is the author interviews, and I guess I was about to say I'm a rose among thorns, but we're all roses, right? So, I have wonderful author. I'm really, I always say this, I'm looking forward to the interviews, but I think I look forward to every interview. This one in particular, I am fascinated by the book and the content of it. So it's something that I'm really, let me say, really, really, really looking forward to this one. Um, but before we get into it, let me just tell you a little bit about myself and Wood Coach Creative, and then I'd allow Keeron to introduce himself. Then we will get right to the interview. So, my name is Shelley-Ann Edwards-Barran, and I'm a creative writing specialist. And what that means is that I get to help authors of all ages to express themselves really well in writing. And one of the things that I'm really aiming for with Wood Coach Creative is to help new and upcoming authors. It's not the easiest thing navigating self-publishing in Trinidad and Tobago, but there's a way, and lots of people have done it. So what we are hoping that through these interviews, we would inspire so many more to share their voice with the world. And in addition to these interviews, we offer co-writing sessions. If you need some support, scheduling your writing, I'm an editor. You can reach out if you need editing done. And we're really building a community for Trinidad and Tobago writers, those who are in process, have already published, or just thinking about it, join the community. We would love to have you. So, Kiran, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. So yeah, my name is Keeron Isaac. I'm a poet and author of poetry, and I am the tree. Shelley-Ann is my editor, and now creative and business partner. So we always love to do projects together. This one is no different. It's our author interview series. And yeah, today we get to interview a very cool guest. So I'll allow him to introduce himself very briefly to tell everyone who you are.
Hi, I'm Dion Carrington. I am a writer, and this is my debut publishing, 57 Days of Emotions, which is a collection of writings, poetry, prose, and even some dramatic entries in there that, really explores my journey reconnecting to my emotional self. So, and really just getting into more writing and doing more stuff, really embracing this next step in my journey. I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Nice, nice. It's very intriguing, and we'll get into it. But first, we just want to start off. We always ask all the authors, were you always a writer? And if so, what got you into writing?
So there's two answers to this question, right? The first answer is no, I wasn't always a writer. Um, Maybe about, well, 7 years before publishing, so that would be 8 years ago. Uh, I started dabbling in writing a little bit because that was when spoken word was booming in the country. And I was really excited about it. I've always been, I mean, since leaving secondary school, I've been a fan of the arts and exploring the artistic and cultural spaces in Trinidad more and more. But spoken word really got to me and gave me an option of, looking into how I could manipulate words and get my message across, my feelings across. And I would really write very sporadically to express how I felt when I had too many emotions bottled up inside of me. Um, and then during the pandemic, I made a decision to take writing more seriously, and this book kind of just happened. The other answer is that when I was in when I was in standard four and we were learning poetry, um, my teacher gave us haikus. We had to write haikus, and I wrote this haiku about a little boy. No, it was a limerick actually. My mistake.
Right.
Right, about a little boy who was chipped with a pin or something like that, and she started laughing hysterically, like fell to the floor, and I was like, "Okay, that's great." But I didn't really, obviously then I wouldn't have known that this is where I would have gotten to. And I didn't
Mhm.
take writing very seriously much after that, as a matter of fact, because of SEA and having to write very specifically to get the marks. I kind of pushed right into the side because I'm not interested in doing things by the book or the way that people say I have to do it. So
Right.
yeah, writing was no longer a part of me until much later on in my life. So yeah,
Wow, that
Okay.
that kind of really hit home for me because I'm an SEA tutor. And so yeah, I felt that right here.
yeah,
Because I understand exactly what you mean. I've met students who they're really good writers. They have the ideas, and as writers, they work on their craft, and I can help them develop that as a writing specialist. But then SE is very specific. It
yeah,
works toward an exam, and therefore, while you can be an excellent writer, if you don't meet the requirements of the exam, you could run into some problems. So
yeah.
it's interesting that you mentioned that. And so is it that if I'm hearing you correctly, is that the reason you kind of stepped off of writing for a bit because you felt like writing had to be within certain confines?
Definitely. I even remember a very specific moment where one of my teachers was giving me comments on a story I had written, and she said, "You can't say 3 days later. What happened in the 3 days?" And I'm like,
Oh, okay.
I don't
Wow.
know,
Okay.
but it took 3 days for this thing to occur. So,
Hmm.
Right.
that's why the 3 days passed. But just not being able to have that creative license, I suppose, really affected my creativity, because as a child, that's what we do, right? We imagine things and we want to create those things that we imagine. And I think as artists, as creatives, as writers, it's our job to tap into our childlike energy, our creative energies, our imaginative spaces, to be able to create the best works possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very true. I agree. And I love that you mentioned the primary school because I could definitely relate to that. I think when I was younger, I wouldn't say I was a terrible writer. I think I just didn't want to apply myself. And I guess as you say, probably to the constraints. I remember one time I had a homework
Hmm.
assignment and we had to write an essay. I don't know why I'm admitting this, but I wrote about a cow named Milktongue and he knocked down a guy, and that was the end of the essay. It was about 2 paragraphs. And I was so proud of it. I was so proud of it. And the teacher read it and then she was like, "This is an example of what not to do."
Oh
And
no.
yeah, I was like, that is. And then from that time, I realized, I'm actually really good at writing, and I was kind of a perfectionist. So I was like, let me write a little better, so I wouldn't embarrass myself like that. And then I started to take it a little more seriously. So as you mentioned, I just remember that. But yeah, I would say it's important for children to be able to have a creative space because now I also tutor, and one of my students she always asks me like, "Can I write about this? Can I write this?" And I say, "Yeah, you can write about anything." But to get your marks, just make sure it fits the scheme
Yeah.
that the
Yeah. So
teacher wants you to do. Yeah, so
I
so
think
that's
that
really that was an interesting point. Yeah.
yeah. So then what was the catalyst then during the pandemic that led you to taking the writing more seriously and deciding
Uh,
to publish?
Right. To be very honest, I started reading,
Oh.
having all the time in the world, and then a girlfriend who loves to read. She was reading a book and she said, "D, like I know you don't really read like this, but this book really, captured me, and I feel like you should give it a chance." Didn't have anything else to do. So I said, why not? And I started reading that book and I fell in love with it. It's amazing. George Orwell's 1984.
Mm.
And after that, I went on to Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. And in there, I like an idea sparked. I was reading a specific sentence, and I have this thing where like thoughts are always running around in my mind, and sometimes two thoughts might clash and create an idea. And I'm like,
Oh,
oh,
that's
that's
interesting.
interesting. And
Yeah.
then I just live with that idea. And it was an idea for a book, you know? So I said, okay, cool. And I kept exploring that and exploring that and exploring that. And I said, this is too good of an idea to just leave it alone. I should start working on it. And I kept working on it and I kept working on it. And I'm still working on it to this day because it's actually not the book that I published.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
That's
plot
yes,
twist.
yes,
I
serious
am
plot
shook
twist
at
there.
shook at. Wow.
Oh
We need
gosh. Yeah.
like a part A, B, and C to the question now because like
Yeah.
just
Yes,
have
yes.
to recover
Are you
a little
willing?
bit.
Are you willing to share? So then, where did the idea for this particular book come from? If it's not
Right.
that idea,
Right.
Yeah, we
So
can we are shook
so
at.
yeah.
I'll tell you more about the other book a bit later on, and we'll focus on this one for now. Um,
Okay.
I knew that if I wanted to write something as great as that other idea, I had to be a more disciplined writer.
Right.
So I wanted to be able to write daily. I wanted to be able to, I don't believe in writer's block, right? I wanted to be able to sit down every day, and once I had a prompt or once I had something that I was working on, I could write. Even if it is 2 lines, 1 paragraph, a whole chapter, whatever, but I must be able to write something every day. So every other week, I would work on the other book. And on the odd weeks, I would be working on this list of emotions that I found, right? Because I've always wanted to take a closer look at my emotional self, because I know that the way that I existed later on in my life, so in my teens and my 20s, isn't always the person who I used to be. And I knew that I was very emotional growing up, and I wanted to dive into why that changed, what was the reason why it changed. I decided to literally just Google list of emotions. I found this list that had 57, and I was writing daily 57 days of emotions, right? So I called
Wow.
it that. I didn't know that it was going to be a book. It was just a project to help me write daily. But after about 2 weeks of writing those, I said, this is really good. And I'm not sure if the world has seen something like this. And I have a habit of sharing my work as well. So getting comments from other people. Like when I wrote on anxious the first time around, which is not what's in the book, it was from a woman's perspective. And I sent an old book what anxiety looks like in males, because we don't usually see that. And I sat back and said, oh, that's interesting. And started realizing that this thing that I'm doing is very important. And, then went on to publish this book.
That's really, really deep. And I love that you mentioned that because I was going to ask you, why was it so important for you to publish, that, especially in the Caribbean where mental health in response to maleness, oh my God, like that's a whole conundrum in itself. So that's something I'm really passionate about myself. To see you write that, that was really, really special and important. So could you just expand on that a little bit, like how important is it for like this era where we are in the Caribbean and your writing in response to that?
Well, I I could say it's important all I want, but I also do have to understand and acknowledge the persons who have come before me that have spoken about its importance, which adds to why it's important, right? And that's the reason why I started my book with a quote by Bell Hooks, right? My full quote is, the first act of violence the patriarchy demands of males is not violence toward women. Instead, patriarchy demands of all males that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves. And this quote is from The Will to Change Men, Masculinity, and Love. And
Right.
I did not know how important the work I was doing was until I happened to read that book while writing this book,
Wow.
and understanding, having that understanding that men wouldn't be the torturous beings that we are, and women and men complain about on a daily basis if we don't treat boys properly when they're growing up. is the roots of this entire problem, why we can't talk about things like men and their emotions and men and mental health openly without getting like a bad reaction or a bad response, or even for a man to be able to have this space, whether it be among his family, among his friend group, among, whoever, to be able to say like, I don't feel good about X. I don't feel good about Y. I'm depressed. I'm, whatever that man may or may not be, well, may be going through, right? So reading helps really help me realize, oh, this is just a personal exploration of the work that she's already or had already been doing for quite some time. And fun fact, Hooks was kind of like ostracized from the feminist community when she started looking at men and their emotions.
Oh,
Because women were like, oh, you're anti-woman now, like, and why you helping men? Women
so
need
like
to
a
be helped or
switch.
whatever. But what she
Yeah.
realized is that you can't help women's problems if you're not helping men, because men are women's problems.
Well,
Very
part
simply
part
put,
of
of
it, part
course.
of it.
Part
So,
of part of it, yes.
and
Very
that's why I
simply put,
was
that's what it was.
that's why I was really, really interested in having this conversation, because that's how I feel about the entire situation. We cannot have a one-sided conversation and expect that the conversation would be complete and give us what we need. We do need to have both sides of the conversation, both being compassionate, both being understanding, and both being willing to learn and grow. And I found it quite interesting that um, I guess I'm going to say this loosely, but someone of your age group would be tackling this, because you
Yeah,
tend to find people who are a lot older,
yeah.
paying attention to these things and, publishing about it. And then the medium of publication, I find quite interesting. The
Hmm.
combination of prose and poetry and the drama and so on. It's not typical, I'll write a book about this because I have something to tell people.
Yeah,
This felt more like, this is my experience, and, let's engage.
yes,
Yeah. And I
absolutely.
really love when you
Go on.
mentioned yeah, I really love when you mentioned childhood, because I think something I'm passionate about as well. I see that the unresolved childhood issues, they obviously coalesce into adulthood, and they have disastrous implications, and it's quite evident in a lot of things happening in society. When you touch on that, I just wanted to say that was a really good point, because that's something I always say as well. So yeah.
Yeah. This is very much me putting myself on a stage and allowing people to have conversations about my life and my experiences, allowing men to say, oh, something like this happened to me too, so that their partners can then look a little deeper at them and start figuring out who they are and why they are. Um, I had a fantastic experience the other day. I just happened to bounce up a friend and artist in Starbucks. And he was like, we have to talk. And I'm like, what about? He said, your book. And his wife was like, oh, yeah, right. And when we started having the conversation, he was saying that he felt like the book was about him, and it has
Oh,
helped both of them have better conversations about his experiences as a child growing up in this
oh,
space. And like I couldn't ask for something better, because that was my intention. Like, people would ask, who's this book for? And my answer would be, the book is for men, but I don't expect men to buy it, because a lot of
right.
men don't really read, nor do they tap into their emotions often. I expect
Yeah.
their girlfriends and their wives and their partners and their sisters and their mothers to buy it. And then for those women in their life to be like, hey, I'm seeing this thing, and it's
Yeah.
reminding me of something that I read in this book. And then for the conversation to begin, because it,
Yeah.
it really is about sparking conversations about these things that I believe are important.
So I just want to do the flip to that really quick, right? Because obviously the positive side to sharing your vulnerability is all these people connecting to it, because I always say true is a quote I got through radical transparency, we breed community, right? So you breed in this community. But on the flip side, how difficult is it to actually put these to paper? Do you think about like when you're writing, you're like, my God, people are gonna read this. This is like something really personal. Or do you like try to like block that out? Because I mean, like how conscious of you are that when you're writing?
When I say that I tap into my charm, I don't mean that light luck that I'm creating when I'm creating. Um, but when I do revisit my work, and when I was revisiting this work while I was creating it, I did realize this is very potent. And
Right.
I started getting worried about publishing because I was unearthing things in myself that I did not know were there or had that much of an effect on me. And I started imagining, what if another man is reading my work and unearthing these things and doesn't have the support system that I do? I
Right.
had two editors while working on this, my best friend and another close friend, so close that, I call her family,
Right.
right? And they were essentially my therapists in the process because I would write something and they'd be like, what did you mean by this? What was your intent when you wrote this? And we dig deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper to the point where sometimes our meetings would just be me literally just diving deep into a specific situation. Like grief was
Right.
really hard for me to write about because I don't think that I've ever like cried at any of my grandparents' funerals. Three of my grandparents have passed in my life, and I didn't feel anyhow. And I think it was that understanding, or at the very least feeling, that I had to be strong for the people around me.
Wow.
So I didn't even process my own feelings about their loss. And that's why I didn't write about their loss, because I didn't feel in that time, or at least I didn't explore or consider my feelings in that time. I was considering the
Wow.
feelings of others, and that's how I acted, right? But I did experience the loss of myself, which is what that poem is about.
Ooh.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. That is
uh
Some
so
pretty heavy
powerful.
stuff.
So much to unpack
yeah.
from her. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
unpack from Bob. I would start with when you said, your editor asked you, what do you mean by this? Because I remember in my first book, I wrote like one or two pieces about my mental health. And I was just happy to like write it with therapy. And
Mhm.
I sent it to Shelley-Ann, and I don't know if she remembers this, but the pieces were Following My Shadow and Disenchanted. And then she asked me, what do you mean by this? And I was like, oh yeah, people gonna read this. I was like, and I know it sounds kind of dumb because obviously
Yeah.
you prepare people to read it. But then when they read
Yeah.
it, you're like, wow, I was so lost in the writing. I forgot like I wrote some pieces that had really personal connection to me. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
wow. But it was good because then I always say like with the editors, like your first reaction of the public was like a good buffer. So it was kind of good that we had this conversation because then it reminded me that these pieces are going to be out there. And then it made me more
Yeah.
comfortable because I shared some of them on like mental health day and got like a good response. So I just wanted to share that as well. So that was really thanks for sharing all of that. By the way,
Hey,
Yeah.
I'm here
Yeah.
to be vulnerable.
There are a couple of things
yeah,
that you said that I really want to touch into. The fact that you are conscious of what is coming up while you're writing, so much so that you're also conscious that these things will bring up things in readers. So, ideas, feelings, unresolved situations would come up for readers. And you also mentioned your support. Um, is this, or let me see how to ask this question. There's so many questions in my mind because, like you said, this is really an important, intense topic that isn't often, coming up in
for sure.
conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess two questions then. Let me see if I could break it into two. One, um, knowing what you know about what can come up and the fact that support is helpful, are you also using your platform as an author now to advocate or provide opportunities for these conversations and so on? So that's one question. And two, how does it still bring up the conversation for you? So you've been through the writing, you've been through the editing and the publishing, but do you still, when you go back and read, does it still create that, does it carry you back kind of thing? So there are two questions. I know, really heavy
Yeah,
questions, but tackle as you will.
it's fine. It's fine. I'll answer the second one first. I I feel as though I've dealt with everything that I've explored and published in this book. So rereading it just helps me to acknowledge that yes, I have done this week and I've built past that point. Of course, growth is non-linear, so it's
Hmm.
not like I don't have bad days or whatever, but I feel really positively about everything that I've explored in that book, and even the things that I chose not to explore in the book, but still did explore in the process of creating the book,
Okay.
right? And with regards to your first question was about like people consuming it, right? Other people consuming
Yes,
it.
yes.
Right, yes, and me advocating. So the answer is I'm very scared. Like I'm extremely frightened of this position that I've put myself into essentially, and what comes with it, because I'm no expert,
Mm,
and that's why I didn't write a self-help book,
mhm,
Right.
mhm,
right? I am somebody who's working through this myself. I'm somebody who's still trying to figure it out day by day. I'm still somebody who feels unsure sometimes. I'm still somebody who is battling at not just understanding the emotions that I feel, but understanding how other people feel, understanding how to communicate best how I feel, how to be vulnerable to the point where it's not destructive to myself and then also to the people around me. I'm
mhm,
still learning, and that's why if you go to my Instagram, like you won't see anything about me talking about my book after it's been published. There's one post, post publishing, which was a week after the book launch, where I talked about how great the book launch was. Everything else was me thanking people on my story for purchasing a book. But I've never continued the discourse online because I am afraid of being in that position, putting myself at the fore as some sort of like guru or someone who understands it all, who's been through it all. And now people come to me to help them. Like I'm really, really, really afraid of that. I wanted to publish this book with a disclaimer. I wanted it to have been read by at least two therapists before publishing. I wanted to do all those things, and if it weren't for my dad who told me, like don't censor your work, allow somebody
Right.
else to censor it if it is, like if that's what they say in the newspaper or whatever. Like if the author of that article decides, yeah, this is some heavy work that people might need some, something to help them go through, some kind of support, as we said, right? Let that person decide. But as the artist, as the writer, I shouldn't censor my own work. So I left the censorship out because I agree with them, but
mhm,
yes, and just a little hint as to something that I am working on currently. I am trying to continue the journey, uh even with my fears, because the work is important. I can't say right now when it will happen, but I am working on an online video series that dives a bit more into these topics. Not necessarily exploring the things in the book because the book exists and it's there to be explored, but exploring the themes, the topics, the reasons why I decided to write it, ways in which things people in my life have done to help me go through what I was going through. And hopefully that could help others do the same for someone in their life that they care about. But yeah.
Yeah, I
Wow.
absolutely appreciate the honesty in the response because there are people who have been through experiences and they want to write about it, like memoirs, autobiographies, and these kinds of things. And I feel like recognizing how writing about these things um, can impact you as a writer and as a person, and recognizing, what it can bring up is something that, as an editor, when I'm working with someone, if they say they want to write a memoir, we have to pause and have a conversation before we get started. If I'm
Yeah.
going to be coaching you through this memoir, then you need to recognize that, hey, things will come up. Do you have a support system? Do you know, at least be aware of
Mhm.
what's going to happen when we go through this, as well as remember this is going to be published.
Yeah.
Are you, you know, there's only so much you can prepare yourself for, but at least be aware that this is going to be published. People are going to be reading it. You'd get positive and negative. You'd have all kinds of reactions. Just be prepared for it. So I think this is the first, I believe you're the first author who has brought up this kind of topic where, personal writing and memoirs are concerned. And I believe it is an important topic to share with writers, emerging authors. Be aware. So you don't have to be responsible for how other people receive it because you can't, but you do have to be aware of what's happening and what could happen. So you'd be as prepared as possible for that situation. So yeah, there are a couple other things that we would possibly get back to when we get into the writing, but I know Keeron had a question he wanted to share.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say again, the transparency, we really love it. And I love that you kind of preface and say, you're not a professional. But in the flip, it's not a question, it's not advice or anything. I just want to say this. I think maybe even if you still go just as you said to us, like just like even if you start the discourse, you preface it by saying that. I think people actually really connect to that because they realize you're just like you're being straight up and you're not like pretense. I don't know if I'm making sense. Something. But a lot of people who, like you said, they aren't professionals, present themselves as professionals, and
Yeah.
they fluff it with nice words, and they get a lot of YouTube views. And because I've seen some videos that went viral under the pretense of giving advice, but when you move all the fluff, it's really nothing. So someone like you on the opposite who actually is genuine about it. I think the aspect of just being transparent, I think people could resonate with that. But that's just a side thought, it's not like advice or a question. At the end of the day, it's really up to you. What I was trying to ask is, we spoke about how the emotional side of it, how that's difficult. But what about like the actual publishing? Even though that could in turn bring its own emotional dilemmas, but like getting an editor, getting a publisher, a printer, what was that process like? The difficult parts, or like what was positive or what was, a little challenging?
Um, I I think I will take this route in answering this question. I truly believe that when we are on the right path, um, everything will fall in line. And if I weren't to do this in this way, things would have gone haywire. But everything came to me like a blessing.
Nice.
As I said, my first editor was my best friend. Well, is my best friend, and we've been friends for maybe close to a decade now. And I literally just told him, hey, I have this idea for this book. I'm gonna start working on it. And he said, okay. And then I said, do you mind being my editor? Because he actually, fun story, very brief. He was a writer in school
Oh, nice.
and yeah, studied literature, which I didn't. And I was actually studying to become an architect. And then after that, I got into graphic design. In Form 6, I was very much making my way towards being an architect. I worked at an architecture firm right afterwards. And then I
Oh,
started studying graphic design. And I was, really making my way into becoming a visual designer in some form of fashion. until the point that I realized it's not really what I want to do. You know, working in the field and also studying graphic design, I realized this isn't what I'm interested in. And I've been writing on the side, and still, it took me a couple of years after that to realize that writing is what I want to do. But this friend of mine was working towards being a writer, and he eventually realized that he wanted to be a designer instead. So we kind of
Wow,
switched paths.
that's so interesting.
Yes.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting actually. So he has a really good foundation for writing. I was just coming from a creative space. He was coming from more of an academic space, and I wanted that support. And then the other editor, she has that same background. Studied literature up to Form 6, and now she's studying law, and both of them working with me on the more fixed parts of poetry and creation, and like creative writing, certain things that I would not have known of because I never sat in the classroom and learned it.
Right.
That's really where their support came more from. So sometimes I would do things out of sheer creativity, and they would tell me, oh, this thing that you did here is actually a literary technique. Maybe you should
Wow,
firm up on that, And so I was learning literature as I was writing the book,
that's
right?
so
And then with
interesting.
regards to publishing, I just happened to stumble across a webinar that was being hosted by Daniel M. Francis, the author of Millennial Mind. I can't remember
Right.
his other book by name right now. And he was doing a webinar on self-publishing. So I did a quick little Google, self-publishing question mark, and I got some information about it, and I saw that financially it's a really great decision if you have the gusto to go out there and sell your book afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So I went to his seminar, which was absolutely fantastic, and I learned everything that I needed to know. I called Nalis. I had a little bit of, mishaps with the ISBN, but I got it in time to publish, and I was able to get a printer very easily as well. Everything just fell in line. And like the only person that wasn't doing what they were supposed to do at the right time and was me, because I did not
That's so
send
funny.
the final manuscript to the printer until a week before publishing.
Right.
Yeah, it was I was in my room just making final changes because it can never be perfect, right? So you just have to like get
Yeah.
Yeah.
as
You have
close
to
to
let
perfect
it
as you
go.
could possibly get.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I was willing to let go, but at a certain point. And I
Yeah.
got to that point and I said it needs to print because I was very strict with myself as well. I set a date. Actually, it was in June, and it looked like we weren't gonna be ready for June. And this was since maybe the November before. It looked like a couple months before June that we wouldn't have been ready. So I said, okay, I can do August, but I'm not pushing this back later than this year because I have a timeline for the other projects, which is
Mm.
more important. Oh, and lastly, um, this was really my means of understanding and getting myself into this space of publishing and writing for publishing and understanding the ins and outs, meeting people that could help in the process, different things like that, so that the next time around I could learn all the mistakes now or learn from all the mistakes that
Mhm.
I make now. So that the next time around there's no mistakes because I'm really, really, really excited about and believe in the power of this other thing that I'm exploring. And like I want to do that right. So I made sure to get my foot in the door, get some experience so that the next time I could say, all right, we're there. This is
Okay.
ready. I know what needs to be considered in what ways and get it done. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
really amazing.
but there are
Yeah,
two
you
things
guys.
that you mentioned that I really, yeah, Kieran, I have to jump in now because something that Dion had mentioned earlier, I said I will come back to it, and this is the opportunity to come back to it. You mentioned before about not believing in writer's block, but
Hmm.
being a more disciplined writer to really get what you want done. And
Hmm.
we also had that brief conversation just now about the editing process not having it being debilitating or keeping you back from getting the work out there. Because another thing that writers, especially new writers, emerging writers, tend to believe is that it has to be perfect. And
Hmm.
so there's a lot of second guessing and going back and so on. And as an editor, I see that happening. And as a writer with an editing mind, it happens all the time to me. So much so that I have lists of um, publications, well, I would say things to be published in various stages
Mhm.
of incomplete because of
Right.
that whole second guessing and the unstated, because it's out loud, I know it's not going to be perfect,
Mhm.
but it's that running conversation. And so these author interviews and the co-writing and all of these, this all part of getting through that fear of perfection. And I say fear of perfection, we think it's like we need to be perfect, but we're really afraid of that perfection, lack of it
Yeah.
when it
Yeah.
happens, what's going to be the result, the whole concept of it. And
Yeah.
so that is something that I really wanted to reinforce. One, um, writer's block is theoretical in the sense that there are things that will hinder writing, but it's not a thing a writer's block. They're each individual things that you can address and work through. And your discipline and working through that was a major part of helping you progress. And then the other thing is we do have to have the conversation out loud about the concept of the perfect book, because if we don't, then we'd get stuck and the list of incomplete manuscripts would keep building
Mhm.
because the ideas don't stop. They really,
Yeah.
really don't stop. So
Yeah.
I really wanted to just reinforce that because our audience, we're aiming for new and emerging authors to sort of help them navigate their own processes. So I think that is something very, very important to touch on. And Kieran, you were going to say something, and I just
Yeah,
had to
well,
say that first.
yeah. Now I have a lot of things, but I'll just say the ones I remember. Um, One thing I really have to shout out, you mentioned Daniel Francis. A lot of authors I spoke to attended some of his sessions. So
Right.
Yeah.
big up him for inspiring a lot of people. He's also with Shelley-Ann. So yeah, I was in one of his sessions as well. He's really helpful and he helped me to go on like Pioneer and all these different things. So he's a really cool guy. Shout out to him. I also love that you mentioned when you said the only thing that was holding you back was you at one point with the deadlines. Because this is a joke Shelley and I had. I said like, like on Scooby Doo when they're unveiling the villain and they
Yeah.
see you're like,
That's
oh my
you.
god, it was me. It was me all along. And I would have gotten away with it. Right? So a lot of times the weapon comes against us, sometimes us in our own publishing journey. So that's really good advice for future authors. So you got a lot of tidbits, right? But like, is there any specific advice you'd want to give like somebody who is wanting to write? And also after, before I forget, I was found this really interesting. We spoke once and he told me you consider yourself more writer than author. So you could probably get to that after. But yeah, just any advice you want to give to future writers and yeah, the distinction between writer.
Yeah. My first advice to any considering writer is to write. Um,
Right,
yeah, and when you can't write, take time away from writing.
definitely.
Right. With regards to publishing specifically, just make sure you have everything in a gear. Have your list of things that needs to be done, whether it be book cover, formatting, ISBN, printer, all these things. Have that list written or on your phone or laptop, wherever, and keep referring to that. Make sure that you set dates and deadlines and different things like that. Like it's just as much a business as it is a creative endeavor. And if
Yeah.
you don't treat it that way, then oh, that reminds me of something else that I need to say. If you don't treat it that way, then you lose out. That's the only time that you lose out. Which brings me to like pricing. Like this book took me 15 months. That's why like a bookstore has told me before that's an expensive book, boy. Well, yeah, because it took me a lot of time to write it, and then I'm funding it on my own, and this is my only source of income currently. Like if I don't
Yeah,
price it like that, then I lose.
right.
And
Yeah,
that's like at my book launch, that feeling I felt, I didn't have to make a cent. I was content. I was happy. I was grateful. I was overjoyed.
yeah.
all the positive feelings, all of it.
I resonate with yeah.
But food had to eat, and
That's
money
Yeah.
had to
funny.
spend to get the food. And if I don't have the money, you know,
That's so true. I want to interject so quick. I remember I was so happy when I published. I told my mom, I said, if I don't make any money, I'm still content. And she's like, that is so sweet. But money spent, money I didn't make. Yeah, back in
correct.
the day. I was like, yes, yes, yes.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
back to you.
you have to acknowledge your feeling, but then throw it away just as quickly.
Yeah, yeah, don't
Because
get airy fairy.
yeah, that's the real world we live in, right? And
Yeah.
to your question, I consider myself a writer as opposed to an author because I don't intend to simply write books.
Mm.
I tell my best friend all the time, and he keeps trying to convince me otherwise. I said I will write and publish 3 books in my life.
Right.
And I know what those 3 books are, and the first one is published already. I'm working on a play. I will do other writing in my life. I will write for other reasons, but I'm not like people who call themselves poets. If you're a poet, cool, that's great. That's not me. I'm also not a novelist. I'm also not a dramatist. I am a writer. Whatever can be written, I'm writing it. I'm not boxing myself into any specific medium so that then I have to think in certain ways and it has to be done in this way. No, I want to be able to write a book where I could have prose and poetry and drama and have it all make sense. I
Okay.
want to be able to bend and warp the way that things exist to just create something new or like show that there are other ways that we could do this thing and it doesn't have to be so fixed as it has been for so long. Like creativity is endless. We could do whatever we want to do as long as we allow ourselves the opportunity to say, yeah, that's something I could do.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah,
Love that.
Yeah, I really do love that. I have a friend who says, there's no box at all. So we're not like trying to get out of the box. There is no box.
it doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah, the box
Yeah.
doesn't exist. So, all right. I think that is like the perfect note to sort of summarize and end on. So,
Definitely.
um,
Yeah. The word of the day was transparency. That was
yeah,
a
yeah,
perfect the word of
yeah.
the day.
The word of the
Transparency.
day, transparency.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
tell
that's
us
really good.
then how can readers get in touch with you, get in touch with the book? I know you said you don't really talk too much about the book on Instagram, but I'm sure it's in a bookstore somewhere or online. So we need to tell people where to find it.
Yeah, so first and most importantly, the book is available currently at Paper Based in Normandy Hotel, St. Anne's. It's also available at Horizons Art Gallery on Macarapa Road. And I feel like, yes, there's a third place, Metropolitan Bookstore on the Avenue, right? So those are the 3 places that you can find my physical book. You can also buy it online via UnQ so that you can have a physical book delivered to you via UnQ. That's UNQUEUE. And then as well as the Amazon, the ebook version is on Amazon. So you can get the ebook if that's what you're into as well. So yeah, that's it for like where you can purchase the book. Social media, you can get me on there, but I won't respond quickly. I very recently deleted every single social media platform off my phone.
Wow.
Initially, yeah, it's been 2 months since I haven't had any social media on my phone. And initially, I would check Instagram daily because I get messages on there most frequently. So I just want to make sure that I'm not like making anybody feel bad for missing their message or anything. But I felt that I was creeping right back into exactly the reason why I came off. So I'm like this coming week here, and I know this will be published later on, but this coming week here, I'm not going to be on Instagram at all, just to make sure that I have control over the social media, and the social media isn't controlling me. But I am the Carrington on Instagram, on Twitter. Whenever I get it, I get it. As a matter of fact, if you really want to reach me, email me. That'll be faster.
Imagine, right? Email
Imagine
was
that, yeah.
faster.
So
But
that's
that's I think that's an important point, and I feel like we definitely gonna need to have you back on for another conversation. But
Yeah, I was
that
thinking it might
that
be a new
idea of
series
the
like interviews
yeah
with Dion. Like that's a new series.
yeah because that there are authors, new and upcoming authors, they believe that they have to be everywhere and they have to be in every bookstore and but we do have a limited amount of energy and time
Mhm.
and space, and for us to be able to manage that, that's a recurring theme with all the authors that we speak to. We need to be able to manage that space. So, don't buy into the hype. Remember, you are the one in control. You decide where and how. And once you're consistent, the books are going to get sold. People
And
are
I
going to
also
see
think,
you.
yeah, and I also think when you mentioned me in the art gallery, I just feel like that makes so much sense. I just never thought about that, especially with how you discuss the book. I feel like
Yeah,
that's a really good audience for the book.
yeah,
That's pretty
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, and also shout out to you being able to spell OnQ because I'm with them as well, and it took me a while to know how to pronounce it, much less to spell it. But they're really cool, and we had a good laugh with the team about it. But they really loved it.
right.
Shout out to you for that
Oh,
bonus
that's
for you, and
hilarious.
shout
Yeah,
out to
bonus points.
yeah,
Ding,
yeah,
ding,
yeah,
ding,
yeah.
ding, ding.
I just pronounced it, and I hope that the interviewers do ask me how to spell it. So shout out to you, transparency.
Yeah.
Transparency. Hey,
Oh my
that's what we're
goodness.
here
But
for.
yeah, but
Oh,
this was
wow.
really, really fun. So thanks
Yes.
again, Dion, for joining us and just opening up with us. And we're looking forward to our new series, interviews with Dion,
Yeah.
coming, coming
Oh,
soon.
for sure, for sure.
Thank you
So,
all for having me.
oh,
I'm
you're
really
most
glad that
welcome.
I could
I
have had
think,
this conversation.
yeah, I think I feel like the privileged one, to to be able to have this conversation. So, thank you for agreeing to the time and so on.
Not a problem.
And for the viewers who are looking at the live, thank you so much for taking the time. For those who are looking at the recording, we appreciate you. Please remember to like and share so that we can spread the word and help as many authors, writers, those who want to get published in Trinidad and Tobago. We really are here to support. So thank you again and have a good one until we see you again. Interviews with authors with Word Coach Creative. Bye bye, everybody.